The New York Giants had a busy opening day of pre-free agency in which they filled a bunch of needs, except, as I record this, one very important one. I'll run down what they did and how the new pieces fit or don't fit in some cases, and more. Coming up next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. I'm your host, Patricia Trainer, credential member of the New York Giants media for Locked On, as well as for New York Giants on SI, which is where you can find all my written work. And we've had a lot of written work posted on New York Giants on SI. Anyway, welcome on into my Blue Crew community members who I hope have been enjoying the Discord channel and the conversations we've been having over there about all these transactions. And of course, welcome on into my newcomers, my everydayers, and everybody in between. Thank you for spending part of your day with us here on the Locked On Giants podcast. And on today's show, whew, man, busy day for the New York Giants in free agency. They covered a lot of ground, including one surprise, which I'm going to talk about in the first segment. Then we'll talk about what they did in the second segment, the impact, the fit, and all that good stuff, the money. And then finally, the most important position that the Giants have yet to address as I record this, which, before I go any further, for dating purposes, March 10th, I'm recording this at 9:30 at night. So as of March 10th, 9:30 at night, the Giants have not addressed this one particular position, which we will talk about. And you probably know what I'm talking about, but we'll talk about it more in segment 3, as well as the potential candidates for the Giants. All right, let's get into it. Originally, I was going to kick things off on this show with the big signing that the Giants made at cornerback, but I'm going to save that for the next segment. I want to talk about the pleasant surprise that is the Giants and Darius Slayton agreed to a 3-year contract for, I believe it was $36 million. Darius Slayton, along with Dexter Lawrence, the two longest tenured Giant team players on the roster. And it's a pleasant surprise for a couple of reasons. Number one, besides the fact that I think the world of Slayton, I didn't think he was going to be back. I really did not think he would be back. I thought at the end of last year, he was just frustrated with how the team, was going, the losing and everything. And also, I go back to the springtime when he wanted a new contract, didn't get it. Instead, what he got was an adjusted contract. And Slayton, came in, he kept his head down, did his thing, was a good locker room citizen. He was a good teammate, coached up those players. And really, the thought of losing him kind of, was a little unsettling for me. And not just because I think the world of Darius, but, Darius isn't a superstar in, like a Malik Neighbors who's going to get all the attention, or, some of these other T. Higgins and some of these other big receivers around the NFL. But what Darius is, he's solid, he's steady, he comes to work, and above all, he's a leader. He reminds me a lot of Sterling Shepard when Sterling was here. Sterling Shepard was never considered a superstar by any stretch of the imagination, but Sterling was somebody that the receivers looked up to. And you go back and you look last year how Malik Neighbors basically said that Darius Slayton was kind of a role model for him. He taught him how to watch film, how to take better care of himself, taught him a lot of things, and he gave him a lot of credit for his development. Now, you just can't buy that, folks. I mean, that is invaluable to have that kind of guy. And quite frankly, if the Giants had lost Darius Slayton, that would have meant they would have had a big hole at wide receiver too. Because Jalen Hyatt, I'm pretty sure they're not looking at him for wide receiver too, not after signing Darius Slayton to a 3-year contract for $36 million. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Hyatt in a second. But the other important thing, and I'd like to think that this is a lesson learned by Joe Shea, because this has been, this is something that's been bugging me since Joe Shane got in here. And that is Joe Shane has let leadership walk out the door. Homegrown talent walk out the door. We saw it with Julian Love, with Xavier McKinney, with Saquon Barkley. If you want to make a case for Leonard Williams, who they traded away, yeah, even though Leonard wasn't homegrown, but he was here for a number of years, all that leadership walked out the door. All right. With Slayton, he found a way to keep a homegrown leader inside the building. And I'd like to think that that is a lesson learned. Now, if the guy obviously was not very good at what he did, then I can understand letting him go. But these guys that Joe Shane has let walk out the door, he has done so. These are players that have been good, that have had, quality seasons for the team. They might not be like superstars, like I said, but they have been quality leaders. They've been quality players, dependable pieces within the offense or defense, depending on the side of the ball they play. And to just let them walk out the door and not replace them. You talk about wanting to build a culture. How are you supposed to build a culture if you're going to let your leaders, walk away? So Slayton is back. I thought that was a very, very important return for the Giants. And I was glad to see him back. Now, what does that mean for Jalen Hyatt? Folks, Jalen Hyatt, remember, he was the guy the Giants traded up for in the third round. And he has just not panned out for whatever the reason, whether it's his frame, whether it's his route running, whether it's his knowledge of the playbook, whether it's a combination of all three. Who knows? But it's pretty obvious to me that with Slayton coming back, now you're going to have basically the same receiver core, the top three guys that you had last year, Neighbors, Slayton, and Wan'Dale Robinson. All right. So now you don't need to go out and get a wide receiver too, because you've got Slayton coming back. So where does Jalen Hyatt fit into this equation? Well, chances are if he's not working out, he might be dangled as a potential trade chip, which would be kind of a shame considering that the Giants traded up to get him. And that would be yet another third round pick. The curse of the third round picks of this organization. You notice that most of the third round picks don't work out in this organization. Not all of them. Drew Phillips seems to be working out, but quite a few of them have not worked out. So Jalen Hyatt, I'm going to keep an eye on to see if maybe the Giants look to move him in a trade coming up, whether it be, in free agency to get somebody or maybe during the draft or whatever. But certainly a disappointment there for the Giants. All right. Coming up next, the Giants had a busy first day of the pre-free agency period, basically the quote-unquote legal tampering period as it's known. We'll talk about what they did. We'll look at the money. We'll look at the fits and all that good stuff coming up right after this. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. Taking care of your mental health can feel like a big investment, but it's just as important as taking care of your body. Traditional in-person therapy can cost anywhere from $100 to $250 per session. But with BetterHelp, you can save up to 50% per session. BetterHelp offers a flat fee for weekly online therapy sessions, making professional support more accessible and affordable. With over 30,000 therapists and over 5 million people helped, it's the world's largest online therapy platform. We spend money on gym memberships and healthy foods, so why not invest in our mental health well-being as well? Therapy isn't just for tough times. It's a great tool for learning coping skills and setting boundaries. BetterHelp makes it easy to fit therapy into your schedule, whether you're working, parenting, or always on the go. Your well-being is worth it. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon for 10% off your first month. All right, Giant fans, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and hopefully you guys have been checking out the video shorts I've been posting on the YouTube channel. If you're not subscribed and you haven't clicked that little notification bell, you won't know that they're being posted. But I've been trying to get out instant reactions and alerts when the Giants make a free agency move. So I put out, I think, three or four on Monday. So I'm sure there'll be more to put out. and I'll try and keep up with that. But anyway, let's get into what the Giants did on the first day of the pre-free agency period. So they were kind of busy. They filled a variety of different needs. Now, not all of the players they brought in are the superstar or the tier one or the heavy hitter type. Couple guys maybe you can make a case for. So let's run down the list. All right, we'll start off with the big hitter, Paulson Adebo. All right, Paulson Adebo, cornerback, signed as an unrestricted free agent from the New Orleans Saints, and his numbers 3 years, 54 million with 36 million guaranteed. Now, Adebo, according to some, I think it's Pro Football Focus's stats, over the last couple of years, 29 forced incomplete passes, 7 interceptions. Um, that's not too bad. I think he ranked first for forced incomplete passes, and he was tied for fourth, I believe, with the 7 interceptions over that 22-game span that he played. Now, Adebo is coming off of a broken leg, so obviously his signing is contingent on him passing a physical. But, folks, I think I've told you this many times. The Giants need a cornerback one. Can Adebo be that guy? It would look like he can. But here's what's interesting about him. Some of the negatives in his game, if you will. Penalties. Even though he only played in a part of the season, I think he only played like 7 games last year because of a broken leg he suffered. He was third on the Saints in penalties. So that's something he's got to clean up. Basically gets called for pass interference and or defensive holding a lot. The other thing that kind of caught my eye, and I went and I did a little digging into this, was initially I wondered if he was a good fit for what the Giants want to do. All right. So Adebo is primarily excelled as a press man cornerback. Well, the Giants under defensive coordinator Shane Bowen, they run a lot of, zone coverage, off ball type of coverage, which is what, we saw Deontay Banks, who's a press man cover corner. He struggled in that system. So really the only guy amongst the cornerbacks that kind of fits what Shane Bowen does is Cordell Flott. So I went back and I looked at some numbers here. I wanted to see, okay, how did Adebo do in press man versus zone? And I went back and I looked at the last 2 years. So here's what I came up with. In 2024, man coverage. I'm sorry, let me start with 2023. 2023 in man coverage, he had 8 forced incompletions, 1 interception. In zone, he had 11 forced incompletions and 3 interceptions. Okay, not bad. Almost a wash. A little better at zone, really. Last year, 2024, 10 forced incompletions and 2 interceptions in man coverage, 0 and 0 in zone. So you add those totals up, and again, this is per Pro Football Focus. So in man coverage over the last 2 seasons, 18 force incomplete passes and 3 interceptions. In zone coverage, 11 force incompletions and 3 interceptions. Not too far off, but again, the book on Adebo is he's more of a press man coverage. And here's the thing, if you're going to sign a guy to big money, wouldn't you want him to be a good fit for what you're doing? Now, does this mean that maybe Shane Bowen is going to be a little bit more flexible and change up his scheme and play more man press coverage? Maybe. We could hope so. If he doesn't, then I hate to say it that, this signing could almost be considered a waste. Why get a guy, that on paper is talented and you obviously believe can be that guy and excel in your system, but if he hasn't really, dominated in the type of system you run, why spend the money on him? So we'll see if Adebo, can make the transition. Some guys can, some guys can't. Okay, other guys they signed. Interior defensive lineman Roy Robertson Harris, all right? A veteran defensive lineman. He signed for 2 years, 10 million, up to 10 million. This guy is going to place Raheem Nunez Roches on the roster. I'm firmly convinced of that. Um, RRH, as I'll call him, he is a guy who can play any position on the defensive line, whereas Nacho, Nunez Roches, he's only a 3 technique. So right off the bat, you're getting better value with Roy as opposed to with Nacho. The other thing that Roy brings to the table is he's got some pass rushing ability. He can push the pocket a little bit better than Nacho can. So probably I would not be surprised if the Giants cut Nacho. I'm surprised they haven't done it already, but I guess they wanted to make sure they had a veteran on board before they do it. But I would anticipate that they're going to make that move, that they're going to cut Nacho, let him catch on someplace else. All right. This next signing that the Giants made, huge. It's rated, under the radar, but it's big. Chris Ford, linebacker special teamer. Chris Ford signed for 2 years, 6 million max. So, okay, what's the big deal with a special teamer? Folks, this is a guy who I think he's in his 7th season, and in 5 of his 7 seasons has had double-digit special teams tackles. He has ranked, in 4 of those seasons, I think he is ranked either 1st or 2nd on the teams he has played for. We all know how lousy special teams was last year, all right? This is a guy, I think he's an upgrade from Matthew Adams. This is a guy who's going to be a core special teamer. And oh, by the way, he can play linebacker on defense if you need him to. So this to me was a very big value signing, and one that I think, when you go back and you grade them, and I will be grading all the free agency activity on an upcoming show. This one is just a big one. All right. Now, the other guy that they signed, as I was just getting ready to tape, so I don't have a whole lot on him, but I have a little bit I can give you. James Hudson III, offensive tackle. All right. Now, one of the actually, let me give you his numbers. 2 years, 12 million plus an additional 4 million in incentives, probably tied into playtime. If you watch the show or listen to the show, I've spoken about how the Giants need a swing tackle. Well, Hudson, although he's primarily been a right tackle in his career, he's also had enough snaps at left tackle. So guess what? Guess who the swing tackle's going to be? You guess it. Probably going to be Hudson. All right. So that is an upgrade then from what the Giants had last year, a better option, in case Andrew Thomas at left tackle gets injured again. 2 years in a row, Thomas has had to miss time due to lower body injuries. So Hudson, another one of those under the radar type of signings, pure swing tackle. I don't know that he could play guard. I don't think he's done it in the NFL, but certainly, as far as a swing tackle goes, a big need that the Giants had given the injuries that they've had before. And Hudson should fill that role. All right. Now, coming up next, they didn't sign a quarterback. They haven't signed a guard yet. So we'll talk about that specifically, the quarterback I want to really dive into, but I'll mention the guard as well coming up right after this. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. If you are waiting and wondering and worrying if you're going to get any money back on your taxes, worry no more. Get matched with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. Your TurboTax expert will give your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return while you get real-time updates on their progress so that you can focus on your day. Your expert will find you every deduction possible, file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. That's how taxes are supposed to be. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service, real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, champions. Welcome back to Locked On Giants. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and it's free agency week. So we're going to be filling you in on all the moves the Giants make and those that they don't make. So again, as I record this, I started recording this show 9:30 on Monday night. So it's now 9:52. I haven't looked to see if there have been any other news, but I'm going to talk now about, two key positions the Giants haven't yet really addressed. The first one is guard, starting guard. That one they have not addressed. And I do believe they're going to hit the free agency market for that. I don't have a list of candidates. Unfortunately, I didn't go back and look and see who's on the board, who's not. But I'm pretty sure that that's coming. I can't imagine the Giants wouldn't get somebody in here to play that guard spot. The big one, though, is quarterback. Now, let's talk about the quarterback spot because this is just an interesting dynamic. All right. It started over the weekend, as I mentioned, with Geno Smith getting traded from Seattle to Las Vegas. Seattle on Monday signed Sam Darnold of the Vikings to a contract. All right. Meanwhile, Justin Fields of the Steelers, who I think everybody, including myself, thought would stay with the Steelers, he went to the Jets on a 2-year deal. Then you had the Browns traded for Kenny Pickett, who I believe was with the Eagles. Dobbs went to New England. And then I forget who it was off the top of my head, but the Dolphins picked up a backup. So basically, the guys that are left on the board, Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson is still on the board. Marcus Mariota is on the board. Jameis Winston is still on the board. So here's the thing. It is possible that good old friend Daniel Jones is going to be the next domino to fall. Now, why do I say that? Because if Daniel Jones stays with Minnesota, I think then it comes down to Pittsburgh and the Giants for Aaron Rodgers. If Daniel Jones goes to the Colts, who reportedly have interest in him, I could see Aaron Rodgers potentially going to the Vikings, returning to the NFC North, where he would have an opportunity to face the Packers twice a year and show the Packers that he still has it. All right. You figure Rodgers is going to be motivated to show people that he still has it. And what better way than to rub it in his old team's face twice a year? Now, Russell Wilson, I had wondered if maybe the trade by the Steelers to acquire DK Metcalf from the Seahawks might convince Wilson to stay with the Steelers. Now, you guys remember that Wilson and the Giants had a brief flirtation last year, only for Wilson to move on after the Giants basically said, you're not going to be able to compete for the starting job because it belongs to Daniel Jones. So that being said, that Daniel Jones domino needs to fall. Now, let's say what worst case scenario happens and the Giants lose out on Rodgers, they lose out on Russell Wilson. Do they go Jameis Winston? Do they go Jacoby Brissett, perhaps? Do they go Marcus Mariota? Do they maybe pick up the phone and call the Atlanta Falcons and see if maybe Kirk Cousins might be available for trade? Now, Kirk Cousins, remember, has a no trade clause in his contract. So any potential trade, the Falcons would have to get Cousins' okay. Now, Cousins, I believe, wants to start. I don't think he's going to down in Atlanta with Michael Penix Jr. having moved ahead of him. Here's the problem, though. If the Giants have to call the Falcons, it shows desperation. I mean, let's face it, the Giants, they are kind of desperate for a veteran quarterback. But now the Falcons potentially can put the Giants over a barrel, which means that if they insist on the Giants giving them pick number 3 overall, which I don't think they would, but you never know. It doesn't hurt for them to ask. The bottom line is if the Giants end up having to trade to get Kirk Cousins, I don't see them trading up in the draft to get one of Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. I don't think they would do that. So the Giants better hope that they can get Russell Wilson, who I believe is their first choice, or if not Wilson, get Aaron Rodgers. Because if they can't get one of those two guys, then they're either going to have to pick up the phone, like I said, or they're going to have to settle for a second tier, third tier type of potential starter. You know, Jimmy G is off the board, by the way. I forgot to mention him. He went back to the Rams. So the quarterback options are starting to dry up, at least the prime pickings. So hopefully the Giants figure it out, because all these moves that they're making right now don't mean squat if they don't have a quarterback that can move this team to win them some games. And look, here's the bottom line. I mean, the Giants were gung ho on Matthew Stafford, and they were so confident that they were going to get him, only to lose him, for Stafford to go back to the Rams. That was a true kick in the gut for the Giants, because now they have to scramble to plan B. Whatever plan B is, like I said, those options are drying up. They may have to go to plan C. And the lower they have to go in terms of the plans, the more, let's just say, interesting things are going to get for the regime of Joe Shane and Brian Dable in 2025. All right, Giant fans, that's going to do it for this edition of the Locked On Giants podcast. Again, thank you so much for tuning in to the program. Now, coming up on the show, I've reached out to some of my Locked On Giants colleagues to ask them about the players that the Giants have agreed to terms with. And as I get those in, I'll put together a little show for you, and we'll just do maybe like a grade type of thing at some point. But that'll probably be later on in the week. As I'm sure there's still a lot of free agency work still to be done by the New York Giants. So I hope you will stay with me all week long. And again, please consider subscribing to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. Click the bell to be notified every time I post a new video, especially now that I'm posting these little shorts for you to give you updates. Otherwise, Giants, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you again tomorrow.